Welcome back to Module 10 on the Jumpstart Accelerated program for planning and deploying Office 365. I have Ajinka Pinto with me, who's walking you through the deck and the content and the scenarios we're discussing. Exchange Online Archiving is the topic, which is tying back to in the Office 365 planning, deploying, certification exam, planning for messaging hygiene, messaging compliance, and messaging archiving. So that's part of that. We set session 1 this morning, which was module 7. It ties actually directly in with this one here. So when you look at the target agenda, we are at the 4th module. Again, mail routing and online archiving. They are very tightly aligned with each other. With that, Ajinka, do you want to walk us through a couple of scenarios where this applies, online archiving?
Sure. Actually, I'd like to spend some good time talking about where this is applicable, what are the kind of customer scenarios that we face, and then probably actually start with the system, because the system is fairly simple, but talk kind of planning, positioning it, where it's required is probably more important, especially for the exam that we're talking about. So, Stefan, probably you can also help me with the scenarios, because that's a major piece in what you do. So talking about archiving, right? So when we talk about archiving, the first thing that comes to my mind is I want to save data for a long period of time. Second, I probably want that data to be accessible to me wherever I am. Third, that data should be searchable, and probably the reason why I'm looking at doing this is compliance. That's probably what we look to do that for. So that's some major reasons that ideally a customer would come up for archiving. But when you're looking at the archive, there are a lot of customers also that may or may not notice the requirement or possibility of such an environment. So whenever you're having that conversation about Office 365, it's important to help the customer understand, saying, okay, there's also something called the archive as part of what you're purchasing, and this is how you can use it. This is how it can help you meet compliance requirements, if that's applicable to that customer, or this is how it's going to help you access all your data, no matter where you are.
That's very true, specifically when you look at specific industries. You have industries which are very tightly regulated. They know about those requirements. You have to be in compliance with regulations that say archive up to 10 years of data, meaning mail and kind of mail conversations, for have legal hold implemented. The pharma industry, the healthcare industry, the financial service industry fall in that area. But then there are actually customers or industries that are not quite as tightly regulated, which will derive a lot of value out of having archiving. They don't use it today, or they don't use it today in a way that is very efficient. So it might be very expensive. That's why they don't use it as extensively as they can use it when they actually go to Exchange Online Archiving, which is a very inexpensive way, relatively speaking, to traditional archiving systems, because you have a massive amount of data that you will amass, and now all this data and storage will be in the cloud. No more infrastructure for you to manage. You just pay for that additional storage that you acquire. So getting actually the story out with archiving is something that is accessible to you now. You can use it. And some customers are out of compliance. You can get them in compliance by now using Exchange Online Archiving, or actually giving this as an additional bonus, because a lot of retail customers that are not compliant with anything usually in that industry, they want to be able to go out and audit their store workers, right, to make sure that they can do legal holds, right, if they're getting sued by seasonal workers, right. Putting legal holds on that is relatively expensive in a traditional system. In Exchange Online Archiving, it is something that is fairly affordable to do, and now you can actually sell it to them this way.
Exactly. And the best part about it is you subscribe for E1, E2, E3, E4. By default, you have the archiving capabilities. The minute you go above the E3 and above, you have unlimited storage. So this is just great. And a great point that you bring, Stefan, about the cost, right? So the most major cost that customers experience or are wanting to get away from is the storage itself, because the data is exponentially growing. You cannot really a capacity plan saying, okay, this is how much it's going to be in the next probably 7 years that I need to retain the data, which is fairly impossible. And the storage cost, while it's reducing, at the same time, you have to continue to invest in upgrading, managing, maintaining those particular storages that you have. So yes, that's a huge cost. And moving to the cloud, you're just storing data there. You don't have to worry about is the storage getting full? Do I need to upgrade? You're just good.
Yeah. And from a licensing perspective, is that E1, 3, 4 has it included. E3 and up will have unlimited storage on archiving. We also will include this in going forward with the K SKUs, right? The kiosk SKUs. So this has been expanded. So all the users will have that. And actually there's, and correct me if I'm wrong, there's a data retention of 90 days automatically included with Exchange, for instance. And only if you want to go beyond that, which is where we talk about Exchange Online Archiving. That's when this applies as additional solution. So there's like a minimal archiving data retention of 90 days automatically included in Exchange by itself, Exchange Online, that is. And then if you want to go beyond that, that's where Exchange Online Archiving kicks really in.
That's right. That's true. So we're talking about storage, we're talking about retaining data, we're talking about having that data easily searchable for compliance reasons, or just because I need to find my email. Right? That probably saved an email a year back and I want to look for it. Search is the best way. So yeah, there's so many reasons to really get email. And one of the things that customers really like is they don't have to maintain or use PSTs anymore. They just take that data from the PSTs and put it into the archive, and they're pretty much done.
Now, it's interesting when we talk about getting Exchange Online Archiving into the customer's mind, getting it included. PSTs is a hard habit to break. It's like public folders, right? Having customers move away from public folders which are not available in Exchange Online is hard, although there are much better ways of handling data, handling email, and sharing it. So it's a habit to break. The other thing to remember is a lot of customers are on Exchange 2003. So we just talked about searching.
Right.
Exchange Online Archiving is all about including all the compliance and legal hold side of it. It's e-discovery. It's an e-discovery tool. And on Exchange 2003, there is virtually no search capability. We forget that because it's 10-year-old technology. I haven't used it for 10 years. But customers who are on Exchange 2003 do not have that experience. So in their mind, they can't even think about this capability yet.
Right.
That's why we have to be very vocal and upfront in positioning, archiving, and getting this in their mind. And in this way, getting in sometimes in compliance and help them plan for that.
And for the PST thing, one of the coolest solutions that a lot of customers can deploy is putting out a group policy that just blocks PST usage. And that helps their end users break that little habit because they just don't have the function anymore. But instead, they have the archive, and you have the automatic archive policies that are helping you move emails from your inbox, from your mailbox, and just push it into the archive. And if you're using Outlook 2010, so SPAC 1 upward, which is the recommended way to use the archive with Exchange Online to get the best experience, if you run a search, just click on Inbox, run a search. That's going to search your entire mailbox, including the archive, and return the result, which is just fabulous.
Yeah.
All right. So a couple of things here, though. from a limitation standpoint, we can archive emails, everything that's basically email, a format that comes into your mailbox, and archive it. You can also do calendars. You can move contacts manually, tasks, that kind of information to the archive as well. But what you cannot do at this point in time, out of the box or natively with the system, is archive IM messages, right? So if you have a IM system separate from Exchange and you want to archive those messages as well, that's something that you cannot natively do unless that archiving system can send the IM conversation in email format to your mailbox.
So SMTP, right?
Exactly.
Now, one question, since you said pretty much everything that's in email format you can archive, what about the unified message, talking about unified messaging, a voicemail that's being delivered to you in an email format, and then you get the voice transcript like we showed yesterday in module
the last module for
module
yesterday.
6 of day 2. Is that something you can archive and then also make discoverable to search across that?
Yes, so that's a good question. I think that's more to understand about how the actual archiving happens, right? So what you have at the back end is basically an additional mailbox that gets attached to the same user account at the back end. So you have the same experience that you would have with your primary inbox if you were to move an email to the archive. So one, yes, you can archive UM messages as well, because at the end of the day, it's an email with WMV attachment, and you can search it as well, very much, yes.
Great.
Right, so talking about these different aspects, different pieces, so what is the level of control that we can really gain on these systems is going to be a big question with customers that have compliance requirements. And that's really going to help plan your archiving system or plan the archiving system deployment for that particular customer. So, for example, if there's a customer that needs to retain emails, again, I love the financial vertical, so I'll go back to FINRA or the financial requirements. They have to retain emails ideally for 7 years before they can delete it. So in that kind of a situation, you need to bump up the retention period in the personal archive to retain emails for about 7 years. You can use legal hold intermittently to manage emails or freeze particular mailboxes in that case. And your move policies would be set accordingly to move emails based on when you want to really archive that data. So maybe a year, a month, or it could be in one day, right? So you want to have emails it being legally held, that means frozen completely, so the user is not going to be able to tamper or delete those emails. So you'll hear a lot of customers saying or using the term immutable storage. It means you cannot delete or edit anything from that storage. And at the same time, Exchange is built to provide customers with a personal archive experience, which means the end user who actually has the inbox and the archive is going to use it in a way that they want to. So if there's an email in the archive and they want to delete it, edit it, they're going to be able to do that. But at the same time, from an administrative perspective, from compliance, you need to have the control to be able to find all deleted emails, to be able to look at versions from edits, all these pieces. So all of this is provided by what we call as the dumpster in the Exchange server. So each mailbox has a dumpster that is configurable and holds the deleted items, the what we call a single item recovery, which end users can recover emails from Outlook themselves, that functionality. It also retains versions, so if end user goes out, edits a particular email, puts it out there, that version is still going to be retained, the original one and the ones that the user creates, all in the system. So that's how you're going to maintain that. Now, say for example, there are different ways that an end user can delete an email. Right? So there's a soft delete. So basically, I go in, hit delete, bang, email goes to my deleted items folder. If you want to retain that, it's still part of your mailbox. It's accessible to the end user. They can drag drop it back into the inbox. Well, what if I empty the recycle bin, right? I empty the deleted items folder. Then it goes into the single item recovery piece where an end user can open Outlook, go in, say, recover items, and actually gets connected to the Exchange server dumpster for that particular mailbox that the user is accessing, and would display all the emails. By default, it's for about 30 days. So they're going to be able to see emails for 30 days, or I'm sorry, it's for 14 days that they're going to be able to retain. They're going to be able to see those emails and restore them by themselves into their mailbox. So a lot of administrative effort gone to help recover emails. There's a lot of self-help that the end user can do directly. Now, what about emails that you delete or go out of the single item recovery as well? Well, the dumpster is going to retain even hard deleted emails, shift delete. Just go shift delete. It's still going to retain that. The only difference is the end user is not going to be able to see those. But if you were to place that mailbox on a legal hold, I'll repeat myself, if you were to place the mailbox on a legal hold and run an e-discovery or search, you'll be able to find that email through the dumpster. Now, you don't need to point to the dumpster or anything, you just need to search that particular mailbox. And e-discovery is intelligent enough, if legal hold is active, that'll go out and search the dumpster and bring out that email. Right? And we saw in yesterday's class how you do e-discovery, or rather we saw that on day one, how do you do e-discovery, and how you can actually find that email, export it to the discovery mailbox, and then take it out of there from Outlook into a PST file, maybe for a legal suit, or if you just want to refer to it, or even give it back to the end user. So that's the different levels of recovery that you can run. And basically attaching those back to scenarios that customers would have in terms of how they want to manage email, right? So they're going to have questions like, can I recover emails from an administrative standpoint, because that's a lot of calls that I get. So how are you retaining backup? So backup is more of a 30-day cycle that we retain for the Exchange system. So we can recover emails for 30 days. But if you have the archive, then you're pretty much set 90% of the time, unless you're actually deleting the mailbox itself. So that's the different pieces. And the beauty of e-discovery, and I'm sure Stefan would add to that, is the availability or the possibility of doing search across different mailboxes in the organization, right? So as an administrator, if I have, or as a user, if I have discovery rights, I can scope or I can provide access to a number of mailboxes, or all the mailboxes in the organization, and you can actually run a search across those for an email or a keyword based on what you're looking for.
Yes, it's very powerful, obviously, and again, the most significant use is across mailboxes is to find like a common theme, and that's where it goes back to lawsuits, litigation, where you want to figure out who has leaked certain information. So if it's something internal, right, it's also for as I mentioned before, in the retail space, you want to protect yourself against lawsuits from your seasonal workers, or you want to make sure that those not as trusted resources that you have employed don't leak information. If they do, you have control over that and can trace it back. So you can search across all of this user population rather than just one mailbox at a time, including, of course, all the deleted. So supposedly hard deleted emails, when you do a shift delete, it's still in the dumpster. So it's still retained, and you have full access to that, and very easy access to, because it's one search across the scope that you can define.
That's right. So, well, that's the whole functionality, the concept of the archive. There are different ways that it can actually be deployed when you're looking at a purely hosted system where you have Exchange Online and your archive online, basically buying an Exchange Online or with archive or an Office 365 complete subscription. Or you can also have a on-premise and cloud-based mix of it, where you have the primary mailbox on premises and you have the archive in the cloud. So now this is supported, or the customer needs to deploy Exchange 2010 Service Pack 1 on-premise, and the mailbox basically needs to be on Exchange 2010 to be able to connect to the cloud or to have the archive functionality. And the methodology to actually set this up is you're going to need to set up federation between the on-premise Exchange server and the online server, like we discussed in the earlier session today, and then enable archiving or archive mailbox access in the federation organization relationship of Exchange server. And that's when you're going to be able to connect to a primary mailbox sitting on premise to an online archive mailbox. So that's one way of putting it. The second is if you can actually have a mix. So basically you're having a hybrid deployment there, and you have your on-premises Exchange server with some mailboxes and archives, and you have another set of users in the cloud which have their mailbox there and also are using archive in that space. So really 3 different ways that you can look at it, and you have different customers that will look at different pieces of this based on how they want to function. Now, ideally you want to go all cloud, but based on the customer's requirement, for example, they have some add-ins, some dependencies on Exchange server, because of which they're not able to move it from their on-premises systems and move it to the cloud. That's when you'll really retain on-premise and you'll just archive to the cloud. So multiple scenarios, but this archiving system is mainly built or only built to work with Exchange 2010 Service Pack 1. All right, so let's have a look at a couple of screens as to what the end user experience is like, and let's start. So when we're looking at OWA, or we're looking at Outlook 2010, or like I said, Service Pack 1 upward. Now, in Outlook 2010, you get the best experience in terms of search. If you're searching on the inbox, you're going to be able to search across, right up to the archive mailbox as well in one go. In OWA, it's a little splitted. You need to click on inbox, search there, or you need to click on archive and search there. So that's how it's going to work. But overall, you have access to the inbox and the archive, no matter which endpoint you're accessing it from OVA or from Outlook. Now, a lot of customers will have Exchange 2007. So if you have Exchange 2007 Service Pack 2 and there's a patch or an update that you can deploy for it to be archive ready, right? So what does that mean is if you're using that, you'll be able to access the archive, but the end user experience is not that great like it would be with Outlook 2010. You literally need to click on each folder in the archive to search for emails, right? So that can be a stopover while you're deploying the archive and you're gauging or engaging with the customer to actually upgrade their versions of Outlook on premise. So that's going to work for them, but ideally you don't want it to happen for a long period of time. All right, we have a view in the OVA and Outlook comparison. All right, so the hierarchy is maintained, everything's in place. Like I was saying, you have the exact same experience like you would with your primary inbox, that you have with the online archive. So all good there. Next piece is kind of running the search options into advanced search and searching through your mailboxes. So if you look on the right, it shows you the advanced find options and all the fields, pieces that you can look for. This is more of the find options themselves. This is not exactly e-discovery, or this is not e-discovery, just a mailbox search on that particular system. All right, so the next piece is so let me back up a little bit here. So how these clients really going to access these mailboxes? So we talked about 3 different ways that they're going to be implemented. So on the cloud completely, or on-premise and the archive remains on the cloud, or in a split scenario where you have on-premise users and you have online users separately and using the archives in their respective places. Now, the primary access location is going to remain the CAS box of Exchange 2010 on-premise if you're deployed that way in terms of having an on-premise server. But if you're on the cloud completely, you're simply just configuring Outlook, connecting to the cloud, and you're all good. All right, so what are different steps that you need to do to actually deploy this? If you're in the cloud purely, you just need to subscribe for the license, and you're good to go. You enable the users for archive once you've assigned them an Exchange license, and they'd have access to the archive, start using it. You can further configure it for retention policies, tags, etc., but that's optional. You want to optimize the deployment, though, by deploying those different pieces. The second piece is when you're doing the on-premise Exchange and archive in the cloud, or the splitted model where you have users both sides with archive both sides. That's where first you're deploying the hybrid scenario and Exchange hybrid scenario that we discussed in the previous session, and then really getting into archival and archival access.
Maybe we can take a quick breather and go back to something that has been very active on the Q&A.
Sure.
Back to Lync, right? That's a big pet peeve, and we're not trying to sell it right now to a customer. But the fact that Lync does not have the ability, I should say, instant messages are not archived unless you store them via SMTP in Exchange. So if you can store them in SMTP as a conversation, then you can archive it, right?
That's right. So the question would be, I mean, if I were to elaborate on that, very much, if you have Lync on-premise is one scenario, if you have Lync online is a different scenario. So if you're running Lync online and you want to archive messages, currently there's no solution to that. You can't really do much with it there. All you can do is save conversation history and later on move it to the archive. But that's going to be conversation history only. You're not really archiving IM data as such. Whereas if you have a Lync on-premise deployment, there are 2 options that how you can archive this data. The best way to do it is deploy a Lync archiving role that's part of Lync on-premise deployment, and archive data to it into a SQL database and be able to generate reports and look into that database later. That would be the best way to go from a compliance and discovery purpose. Yes, there's going to be 2 different locations for archiving, but I think that should be okay. From a compliance standpoint, how much I've interacted with different customers, they'll look differently, and it's not that much of a hassle if you have SQL and the right reports in place to search through.
Yeah, so basically Lync online all in by itself, you cannot do it. You have to do some extra work. Lync on premises, this will work. And maybe to add some color to this, how this is transpiring and how are the workarounds. I mentioned this before in the module. I personally am with Microsoft. I'm on an Office 365 environment, and I've been put on legal hold several times. Not because I was sued, it's just the role I'm in. There's nothing bad around a legal hold. It just happens. It just means that on the back end, nothing will be deleted. It will be discovered and things will be held. What legal does at that point is they send you an email and say, if you talk about a certain subject, that's a subject of the litigation that's going on, don't send any instant messages, right? Don't communicate over the phone. Do it only over email, so it can be actually tracked and traced and can be part of that legal hold. So those are the things and workarounds that happen at that point. But again, Lync on premises, you can do it. Lync online, you have to do some workaround. You could do it through the SQL database, store it there, discover it there, or you have the conversation history only if you make this part of your Exchange Online inbox.
Right.
Good. Hope that answers the question. To let us know if not.
All right. So, going back to the presentation. Yeah?
Yes.
So, keep those questions coming, though. But very interesting. So, available to cloud and on-premises users is what we're looking at. So, basically, when we're talking about the setup piece with hybrid, you're enabling your customer or your end user for archiving in different ways, right? So if you have an end user that's on the cloud, you're just enabling archive there for them. And if you're in hybrid scenario, you have just the archive mailbox in the cloud. So you go ahead, enable the archive mailbox only, which is the only option that you're going to get there. And after that, on-premise, what you do is you create a hosted archive mailbox for that end user. So that's going to help you connect the user that's sitting on-premise with the archive mailbox sitting in the cloud services. All right. Last part, we've basically talked about archive policies, retention, and combined policies. But let me walk you through a bit of tagging and what are these concepts all about. So from an administrative standpoint, what you do is basically create retention tags, as it is called, that a user can select by right-clicking on a folder or an email in Outlook and saying, okay, the retention tag is going to look something like a retain email for 2 years that are in this say, folder or in the inbox. And you apply those retention tags. If you're doing mailbox retention management or MRM from the server side, by default you would apply these policies to different folders, or the default folders are part of the inbox. So that's basically retention tags and retention policies that tie together to provide retention, automatic retention for emails in the mailbox. Right. The next piece is around deletion policies. So you want to retain emails. Next piece is you want to automatically delete that data once the retention policy is lapsed. So you have that created and put into place. And you can put precedence on per item. So say, for example, you have the inbox. You have 10 emails as part of that mailbox. And the inbox says your policy is to retain emails for about, or delete emails for 10 days from the time they're received. But if I go into a specific email and assign a different policy to that, saying retain this email or delete after 1 day or delete after 100 days, that policy is going to take precedence over the folder policy. The second portion is how do you help or enable the end user to really move emails in an automated fashion rather than them having to move emails between the inbox and the archive. Now they have that option that's not going to be taken away from them, but you can have move policies that say after 50 days, 10 days, and I'm just throwing hypothetical numbers here, you can set it as per requirement. To move emails from the inbox or from a folder and move it to the archive in a specific folder. That can be very easily done. All right, so just a quick demo of creating retention tags. Now this is the Microsoft Online Portal in the Exchange Management Console place, I'm in the Organize Email section and Retention Policies. So I basically create a number of retention policies here: delete, archive, etc. And this is all server-side settings. And in Outlook and OVA, I can simply go out as an end user and select those policies as required. So I'm going to keep this on your screen for about 10 seconds, just so that you can get a quick grasp of what's there on the left side and right side of the screens, and get a quick grip on that. All right, so let's go ahead. So you have different policies, different ways of managing email automatically using the system. And basically what's happening here is there's a good, solid control that's available with the administrators now to be able to comply with different compliance requirements, to get reports, to search mailboxes, etc. And at the same time, you can control who can and who cannot manage or search through these mailboxes using the role-based access control already inbuilt in Exchange. Right? So that's the policies, and I was referring to mailbox retention MRM policies that are available. Now, if you have MRM policies, if you're syncing AD, or you have on-premises or a hybrid deployment rather in on-premises mailbox, in the cloud mailbox, if you have deployed MRM policies in your on-premises Exchange server, those policies are not going to get imported or synced to the cloud server automatically. So you need to do an extra step there and use the export-import retention tags commandlets to export policies from the on-premises system and import them into the cloud. All right, this is important so that both these systems are the same level. All right, and now let's have a look at legal hold. We've talked about the dumpster, how it works. So I'm going to leave the dumpster portions for your reference here. Just talk about the e-discovery or search portions. So once you assign an end user discovery mailbox rights, and the person's there are other users that are enabled for archive, or you want to provide search, you can the end user would get a manage organizations option, and they would be able to do e-discovery from there. The second portion is, say this person is running e-discovery, but they need to look into the dumpster because of the deleted items and versions that are sitting in that portion. Now the administrator needs to go out there at that point and set legal hold. So what you're seeing on the screens here is coming into the user properties using the Microsoft Online Portal and setting enable hold. So by default, legal hold is disabled for all end users. So you go out, enable legal hold, and you can put out a message like Stefan was describing earlier, that you receive an email or a message that you're on litigation hold. All right, so there's the little message that's displayed in Outlook for the end user for once they're placed on legal hold. So it reads, this mailbox is on hold for blah, 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 blah. So that's the message how you can display it.
So what you're saying is, by default, the entire organization is on legal hold, unless you turn it off.
Oh, I'm sorry. Did I give that impression? No.
No.
By default, legal hold is disabled.
Right.
You need to go out and enable legal hold based on how you require.
Can you do it for the entire organization all at once, or do you have it do it by mailbox by mailbox?
So it's kind of a trick question. So you enable legal hold for a particular mailbox. So you can go out, run a script, and enable for the entire organization. So yes.
So via scripting, you can do it. You could do it. Yeah. It's a question that's in the queue, and I think it's a pretty good one to ask. Also, a question that came in. Maybe you can take that right now. Sure. Just to go back to the personal archive. What's the difference between online archive and a personal archive? If you can recap that.
That's a good question. So so I should say our apologies. We use a lot of names for the same thing. So when a user is subscribed to Exchange Online, and by default they have the archiving feature. So that's called personal archive there, because that's an Exchange 2010 personal archive feature. That's as much. The only brand name difference is when a customer is subscribing in for the archive separately, maybe to use it with an on-premise Exchange server. That's where it's called Exchange Online Archive. It's the same piece of technology at the back end. It's just how it's called in different situations.
Good. Okay.
All right. So that's legal hold, managing legal hold. So you have, we've talked about single item recovery. There's a little commandlet on your screens right now where you can go out, enable single item recovery as well for your references. So two pieces, fixed retention and single item recovery. So with single item recovery, like Stefan and I were discussing earlier, as to it's available for 14 days by default, but you can always extend it. We don't recommend you do that beyond a year because that's going to take up a lot of dumpster space, and you don't want items to be overwritten from that piece. Right. And next, another method is journaling. So we support journaling in the online services, but there would be this question in the service description when you read it. You cannot journal to an online mailbox, which sounds contradictory. So let me take a minute to explain that. When we're talking about we support journaling in the cloud, means that we can journal messages if a customer is using Exchange Online. So we can journal messages that the customer is receiving in Exchange Online outside of the Exchange Online system. So if they have an archiving system on premise or in the cloud somewhere, third party, we can journal messages to that. But what you cannot do is journal messages back into the Exchange Online system to another mailbox. That's not supported. All right. Let's have a look at discovery, multi-mailbox search. We talked a lot about it, so let's have a quick look through of that. But just to reiterate on the requirements there, the end user running or needs to run multi-mailbox search needs discovery rights prior to be able to run that. So the user comes into the Exchange Control Panel, logs into OWA, goes into the Exchange Control Panel portions, clicks on the e-discovery piece and starts a search, basically a keyword or emails that are sent or received from or to a specific person or for a specific time period, and basically clicks save. That runs a script at the back end which runs that search. Now, the search depends on how many mailboxes you're searching across, how much relevant data is available, how much data is available in those mailboxes that needs to be searched. So it could be a couple of minutes before you get the results, but not hours and days. So that's the piece. And you can have a little trigger if you're looking on the screens right now, just down below. You have send me an email when the search is done. So you don't have to look at the screen and keep monitoring it, but just put that check mark and you'll get an alert message saying click here, your search is done, to view results. All right, that's quite all from my side today. I hope you've enjoyed the Exchange sessions and it's of value to you. Do remember these sessions are all related together. So to get the big picture, like we always suggested, from day 1 to day 3 is going to get you best value to not only appear for the exams, but also to work with your customers and deploy, get them on Office 365.
Maybe we can take a moment to answer a few questions that are pretty recurring.
Sure.
We talked a lot about legal hold already, and one of the questions that came in recurringly is around, so when we have, and it's for some reason I think because you mentioned 7 years, that's the recurring number here. If you have an online archive set to 7 years archiving, when exactly is it going to be deleted? So you have, what you do is basically you extend the lifetime of your dumpster to 7 years. Is that what happens? And then is after 7 years the cutoff time? Is that when the email gets deleted? 7 years in 1 day? Or does it mean it lives for 7 years at a minimum? It might be deleted a month later, a year later, depending on how we have storage, depending when the script has time to clean up. How does that work on the back end?
Sure. So one thing to clarify first, the number of days you can retain content in the archive is unlimited. Right? So 7 years is an example, but talking about when is it going to be deleted, it would be very email specific. So it's from the time the email was received, 7 years from then is when the email will disappear from the mailbox. So that's how it works at the back end, because the max you'll see is probably a day's delay. It's when the Exchange search or job runs every 24 hours to check for these retentions and tags. And the max you'll see is a 24-hour delay, and that email will be gone the next day.
Right. Okay, thanks for clarifying that.
You're welcome.
Let's take another one here. Actually, interesting one because it's very PC specific. Do you have personal archives available also on a tablet if you don't have OI?
So the question would be more like if you're accessing email from a tablet, which client are you using? Right? That would
let's say if you have tablet implies iPad, so you don't have a client today for the iPad. But what if you have a Macintosh computer, not in this case not a tablet, but a Mac, so you use Office for Mac. Do you have, that would be Outlook 2011 for Macintosh, do you have the same access there?
I don't quite recall this. Probably I need to check, and I can answer that question in the Q&A for Mac specifically. But for any device, basically, that you're not running Outlook 2010, the best way to access the archive is using a browser and logging into OVA and getting access to it. That would be the best way.
Well, I'm probably closing out with one last question is around, can you remove items out of the archive? I mean, from a legal hold perspective, we don't want anybody to remove anything from the archive. So when you said archiving, nothing can be removed. Everything will be retained for 7 years, including any edits, any changes, any deletes. So I'm answering my question right now myself, obviously. But if you want to add anything to that particular topic.
Of course. So there are two things here, right? You're saying if you're applying legal hold, then basically nobody's going to be able to tamper with the emails. But at the same time, if you're not applying legal hold, the end user is going to be able to delete emails. But the nice part about Exchange is it gives the end user the space that they require to work with their emails, while it provides the administrators or the compliance department their flexibility to be able to search and find even deleted emails using the dumpster. So does that match? It's just about the timing when you're going to throw the switch for legal hold.
I was about to mention that because there was a very specific question around that. Archiving is there to prepare for a legal hold, because once you put a legal hold on a mailbox, you know that something is going on, but you go back in the past. So if you have the ability to already clean up things, then legal hold doesn't have much effect on you, because you already deleted the item. So you can permanently delete, but it still goes in a dumpster. It still can be discovered as part of legal hold. So short question, short answer would be, if it's in the archive, it will be retained either way and will be discovered for the amount that the archive is set up for. And you as an end user cannot make anything vanish.
Right. So basically what we're doing is we're providing a software based immutable storage. So,
yep, that's the best way of putting it, even
technical
shorter than that. With that, we're going to close on the Exchange on an archiving session. That's module 10 today. And that's the last module that Ajinka will be presenting. So thank you for long 3 days, giving us all this content. And we will go into the SharePoint Online next. That will be module 11 and 12. We'll bring full viewer back. And we're going to take a 10-minute break, and we'll see you all refreshed and ready for the finish.
Yep. Thank you for having me here, Stefan, and hope you guys had a good time. Wish you all the best for your exams. Bye now.